Hello and welcome to the Lucrative Landlord. This is a casual and unrehearsed evaluation of real estate investment property. No representation to buy or sell any property is being made. This evaluation is for educational purposes. No bids are offered and all numbers are estimates. To receive weekly updates and property evaluations, please visit and subscribe at lucrativelandlord.com.
Greetings, this is Robert with Lucrative Landlord. Today we are going to evaluate another property. You'll see how we got to go through these, what we look at as we evaluate investment properties for your educational purposes. If you'd like to see more of these, please go to lucrativelandlord.com and subscribe on our mailing list to get updates whenever we do new profiles, which we do a couple a week usually. So this particular property is located at 729 West Quartz Street. It is two structures, but it is considered a threeplex. This is a photo of the property here. Move myself out of the way. As you can see, it's had some renovation on the outside done to it probably about 10 years ago. The age of that renovation is showing, and it only gets worse as we go along. Here's an aerial photo. You can see down here where all of the paint is worn off the porches, these handrails over in this area, and then you're going to also see some brick damage that we'll discuss quite in detail later. Here's a front view. Again, more of the paint is peeled off. Maybe it was a little more than 10 years ago when this was painted. They did a really nice job in painting it, but it's definitely showing its age. One of my concerns on this property is the height of this hand railing on the deck. It's actually under 30 inches and it needs to be a little closer. Well, it needs to be at least 42 inches in height. There's a lot of things that can be done to fix that, but it is something to consider when you're looking at a property. The insurance company will not insure the property, and so you're going to have some additional cost. And there's just the straight out liability of somebody falling off of that. This is the back porch. There's a 4-inch rule, basically. A 4-inch ball can't pass through the handrails in any spot. As you can see here, a small child could easily fall through this. The insurance company will likely not insure your property, or you'll have a liability issue. So consider these when you are looking at a property. Again, aerial photo, you'll see across here at the top where a lot of the paint has failed. We also get a glimpse of the roofing. I have some closer up photos that we'll get into as we go. It appears that this roof is a laid out, hot laid asphalt roof that later somebody came along and put a rubberized paint on coating. You'll see here around the chimney where it's failing. The other thing about this photo is that there's a layer of snow that morning, and so the majority of the roof is covered by snow, and so we really can't get a good evaluation of what it looks like truly, but there is already some signs of failure. I can't imagine it looks much better underneath the snow. This is the neighboring structure. As you can see, it's a threeplex and it's separated by a few inches with its own walls, but it is considered a threeplex. It is on one lot. The neighboring property's roof is a black rubber roof, of course, because it's black. The snow melted off of it by the time we took the photo. But its age has got to be well over 20, 25 years. It is definitely a candidate for a replacement. As you can see, it's leaking in the unit. This was actively wet at the time of the photo. And there was a couple other spots where it was a little bit worse. So both structures will very likely need a roof in the near future, or at least an immediate roof repair. There's a farther up photo. One of the other things about is all of the chimneys are missing the little cap that the draft preventer on the top of the chimneys, and so that's kind of an expensive repair that needs to be done for all the heaters to work properly and not have the pilot lights blown out. Here's a little bit closer of a photo. I don't know if I can zoom in on that. There we go. You can start to see what we're talking about, where this painted roof surface is starting to wear thin. There's a couple other spots around the edges. Again, without the snow being in the way. I don't know how to make that go away. There we go. Now I've made myself disappear. What have I done? There, I'm back. Let's make sure I haven't jumped past my photos too much here. The other concern with this property is you can see how there's quite a bit of brick settlement that's happened, and this is going to be kind of a recurring theme as we look at the structure. But you can see mainly over these windows. You can see where there was another one in repair over there. You can see where these bricks probably lined up straight at one point, and this one has dropped, and the whole thing is sloughed off. This is a continuing problem that nobody's addressed now. They've done some cheap repairs on it, but it should be a concern if this is an investment you were looking at. Here on this side, you can see the same thing over the windows where there's some brick sloughing. You can also see these little metal rings right here. Those are some anchor bolts that were placed in to keep the brick and stabilize the brick in place. This is kind of what we want to see in this situation. It's been done, but it's not been done everywhere. Ideally, we wouldn't see it all because it wouldn't be needed, but it is in this case. And so it's been done, but it needs to be done some more. The other thing is we see some of the wear and tear on this paint. This paint needs to be done immediately before it continues to wear into the woodwork, and then those posts need to be replaced. Again, here's some more brick that was repointed. You can see some of the spots in the joint in the mortar where they replaced the mortar to try to hide the cracks, and then they tried to secure up the bricks. There's a lot of movement in this structure. This is in between the building. You can see where they went crazy with the anchor bolts to hold the brick wall in. This brick wall is bulging pretty well coming in this way. When we entered the basement, you'll see why. Here's an example of the paint on the porches. Again, the paint's in real poor condition. This place once looked beautiful, and it can quickly again, but it's going to need considerable paint work. This is on the east side of the structure. We can see where they've attempted to anchor the bricks in. You can see where it's fallen quite a bit. There's some more stress cracks going over here, and then there's some stuff where it almost sloughed out entirely out of the bottom. And then you can see what I was talking about with those flue vent caps. This is what should be on top of them. I think this is the only one out of like 6 that had one on it. Yeah, so here's another photo up close. You can see in here where the bricks have settled around the windows. That's pretty common. But the other thing we see here in the parapet is where a lot of moisture has come in and has eroded out all of the mortar joints. And at some point that's going to fail and continue to be a problem. Again, you can see over here where we're missing one of the chimney flue vent caps, and then this is the one where we saw previously. Up close photo again of the mortar joints and the condition of that parapet wall, a little bit more of the older roof. These roofs were not a bad roof, but they, tend to be, here in Butte, you tend to stop seeing them about 20, 25 years ago. So it kind of gives you an idea that the age of the roof is at least that. This is the garage in the back alley. There's a lot of work to be done here. It kind of looks like bulldozer bait to me. I don't know, tenants definitely like having garages, both to park their cars and keep their toys. Nobody's going to keep anything that they care about in this place. So there's some considerable cost in re-roofing and siding and painting and putting a proper door on the structure, or just even removing it entirely. From another angle. So this is part of why there's so much brick failure and instability. This is a historic photo of what's known as Missoula Gulch. It was a placer mining operation that ran through the Butte Hill, and then later was filled in with mine waste, and then later we built structures upon it. And so that's why a lot of the properties in this kind of north-south running off, kind of kicking over to the east a little bit, direction, there's this gully that is a real unstable soil, not a great place to build, and you'll see most of the properties in this area have these brick failures. Take a look at it if you're in that area. Typical floor in this property needs something, either carpet repainting, refinishing, or whatever, but the floors are all terrible in this unit. Another photo of the floor. All the bathrooms are terrible as far as flooring and the overall fixtures. There's several things going on in this photo where you're looking at the floor being both old and unattractive and then ripped and way past its useful life. But also if you look over here behind the toilet, the exposed plumbing lines are galvanized, and then there was a repair done here with CPVC, which can't be in an exposed environment like this. A tenant living in here very likely would have a small child. That small child's going to step up on this pipe to go wash their hands, and then you're going to have a big water break in the property. So this stuff is not suitable for bare locations. We got some newer copper pipes in this upstairs bathroom, but as you can see, this bathroom is pretty gross. It needs some flooring. It needs some restructuring. This is not a place that I would want to live. Again, more flooring. This is probably the best of the flooring in the whole house, which kind of tells you something. Again, you can see all the, and I can't imagine what the water damage looks like trapped underneath this linoleum flooring here. Again, going across the back, you're going to see a bunch of galvanized piping, and the drain lines look to be lead, which often leak and have a lot of problems with trying to do any repairs to them. More galvanized plumbing. You can see where it's leaking a little bit over here. Just kind of a general disaster. The plumbing in this property needs to be completely redone. General condition of the walls, as you can see, it's got some great historic features as far as the trim around the doors. Most of the interior doors actually looked like they were structurally okay, but most of the walls had holes punched in them and sagging spots, and the whole property needed to be painted throughout. Nearly every one of the windows was one of these older single pane windows. Most of them were broken. Surprisingly, nearly every one of the windows locked properly and it opened. One of the biggest concerns I would have here is the lead paint, presumably lead paint, that's peeling off the windows. This is a real hazard when it's peeling like this. Particularly kids will peel it off, or they'll pick it up off the floor or whatnot. These windows are all single pane and are a candidate for replacement for both operation security and just getting rid of this lead paint. And then tenants are a lot happier when they have a more energy efficient window. Here's the kitchen. As you can see, it's just kind of gross. I don't know who would really be excited about living in this house. You're not going to attract very good tenants by exposing them to these particular conditions. And then the plumbing is all over the place. I don't really understand how this quite is functioning properly, and maybe it isn't. All three of these units are vacant at the time. They are actively trying to rent them, but nobody wants to live here. Heaters, all these heaters are old, as you can see. This thing is way inefficient. Is it safe? It's certainly not efficient. There's another one. Yeah. It gets worse. I don't know. This thing might be original to the building. And it does have, all of the heaters did have their safety valves, but the problem with these safety valves is they tend to be about $500 to replace, when you can just put a $1,200 heater in there and start anew and you have something that's efficient with a fan in it and have all the safety features. So all the heating units in this building needs to be replaced. One of the few things that was new and in good order was the electrical service main coming into the property. Some of the units had newer electrical panels. These kind of belong on the inside. This is where the breakers would be. They kind of belong on the inside, but there's no code that says that they have to be. But then you run into one of these. This is probably from the 1950s. So the electrical is mixed. There was some evidence of new wiring. There's some evidence of some wiring that was probably replaced somewhere around the 50s. And then there's some evidence of some active original wiring. So the electrical needs to be pursued a little bit further in this. It was very much a mixed bag. Here's an example where you can see what's coming in. They just did a real poor job of running the wires, but it does show that they did some upgrades. This is an example of what nearly every one of the electrical fixtures in the unit look like. This thing is beyond junk, and nearly every one of them needed to be replaced. For the easternly unit, this is the access to the basement. Clearly, no one has been in here in a long time to do any work on this property. We did not even attempt to crawl in there and evaluate the basement on the eastern side property. This is the western side building basement access. What was funny about this is recently the power company came in and ran new gas lines. They didn't even bother to do it right. They just ran it through the door. And so you can't close this door in the basement, which means the basement's going to freeze in the middle of the winter. So you're looking at some cost of getting that fixed. And I don't know, it's pretty goofy. I'm sure that nobody really cares. Here's the basement. One of my concerns here is all these posts are sitting on dirt. Wood on dirt contact is not a good thing, but this is the least of the problems in this basement, because we get over here and you'll see that the rock foundation has this loose fill underneath of it, and it's been slowly sloughing off. From this angle, that doesn't show as dramatically in the photo as when you're in the basement, but this section of the wall at the top is about 4 inches off center to 6 inches off center from here, meaning this whole wall is slowly caving into the basement, which is why part of why the bricks are falling off the side of the building. This is a section, basically I've turned around behind me, and this is a section where the entire rock foundation has crumbled in. The solution for whoever did this decided to just put these boards up and then put this decorative paper over it probably 30 years ago to hold the rock foundation from falling in. So basically these boards here, these 1-inch boards, are holding the whole house up. If you were to remove this would all fall out, and then nothing would be holding the foundation up. And so that's why you see a lot of the movement in the brick in between the two buildings. So there's a couple of interesting things going on here. These look to be the old curb stops for the water. No, those are gas because they're yellow. These two are the water lines, and then you can tell that they cut the concrete and replaced it, and then they used a substandard concrete that kind of peeled off. And so the sidewalk kind of needs to be replaced in this area. But of more concern is these dual water shut-off valves, which tells me that there's 2 water lines coming into the property, which means you're going to have twice the water bill. So this is a 3-plex, but it's got 2 meters in it. Minimum charge, I believe, is something like $38 a month, $36 a month. So now you're looking at a $75 water bill because there's these 2 lines going in here. So I saw that, suspected that. There is water meters, and they are a nice copper line. It's probably one of the few newer things about the property. And then I confirmed it with a curb card for that there's 2 services in here. Excuse me, you can see that these 2 little dots are where the shut-off valves are. One comes in, pops across through the one property, pops across that wall. This is about that photo where we saw the meter, and then this one runs in. So yeah, just one of those things to look at for, because you're going to have that additional cost of having multiple lines. I've seen 4-plexes with 4 individual lines into 1-bedroom apartments. People that move into apartments do not want to have to deal with having to put the water in their name and that sort of situation. And as a landlord, the last thing you want is to have 4 individual lines to maintain coming into your property, beside the monthly cost as well. Further concern, these hot water heaters, they were ancient. They were over 20 years old. But you start looking at this plumbing, and it's a lot of galvanized mixed in with copper. When the copper and the galvanized plumbing are connected, they create a galvanic reaction, and the 2 metals basically consume themselves fairly rapidly. So whenever I see that, I know that there's a plumbing failure on its way. Plus, any galvanized piping tends to be, plus 40, 50 years old at this point. Sewer lines coming in. These are the sewer stacks from the apartments above, but there's a house trap in here. It's kind of a U-shaped trap. I think historically, when there was a problem with like rats and stuff trying to get into your toilets, running through the sewer lines, they'd build these house traps. The problem is that they're trapped for all the junk that comes through the line, and they tend to clog up and need to be removed. This one sits right underneath the foundation. It's kind of in an odd spot, and there's no service line cleanouts. So you're looking at a pretty expensive repair if backup was to occur. So that's kind of the general condition of the property. I wasn't super excited about it overall. We get into what are the costs. So the properties are currently up for rent. They're asking way too much for them. They think that they can get $700 for them, but as you can tell, all 3 of them are vacant because they're way overpriced. I think if this property was fixed up nicely, like very nicely, like it should be, then you very well could get $700 a piece for these for the 2 bedrooms. But right now your market is around that $350, $400 range, and that's even if you can even get all the services patched together as they are. But I did run the market rents at $700, assuming that someone was going to put a significant amount of investment into it. So you can see that you're looking at around $2,085, $25,000 a year in income off of those 3 rents. There wasn't really much. And the other thing to consider that in that market rent is keeping the garages. Having a place uptown with garages is fairly rare, and people do want those units. So that's what's going to get you into that close to $700 price. So we get into the mortgage payment. I don't have a mortgage payment number on here just because that's kind of a very personal situation for individual investors. But let's look at some of these other numbers as we get in here. Their purchase price on that property, I believe, was 140. Yep, they're looking at 140,000 on this property, which I think is way overpriced, but that is up to you guys individually to decide. So here's another problem that I found on this is that the taxes on this property were currently $204 a month. One of the problems on that is that they currently have the service fees. That's the trash pickup, the landfill, and the sewer. They have it marked down as a single unit, and we're not accounting for it being a triplex, which means that somebody's not paying as much tax as they should for that property. Eventually, the county assessor is going to get that figured out, and so you need to factor in these sort of things when you are evaluating these, so you don't get hit with that additional $900 in this case. On top of that, the taxable value. So it looks like the current owner paid somewhere around $98,000 for the property. They're selling it at $140,000, which assume that the property went for that $140,000. It needs at least $60,000, in my opinion, of work into it. And so you're literally looking at kind of a $180,000 assessed value, maybe higher, maybe lower, but that's kind of a safe spot to be. So if you reassess the taxes and you fix those service fees on this property, you're looking at an annualized tax bill of just under $3,200 at $3,134.89, which is up from the $1,231 that the current owner is paying. But upon a sale, upon fixing those roofs, upon the tax assessor figuring this out, that they are under assessing the property for its overall services, that could be a real surprise if you were to just ask the owner, oh, what's your tax bill? So we got to figure those things out. On the lucrativelandlord.com, we have the tools that you need to figure out what your future tax bills can be. And if you have any questions, just contact us and kind of help you figure that out. Insurance is an estimate of $250 a month. That's just kind of based on a $200,000 replacement value. Utilities, again, there's 2 meters, so you're going to have twice the expense on water as you normally would for a threeplex like this. Groundskeeping expense, $35, might be low, might be high. Management's 10% of those rent receipts based on that $695 price tag. Factor in some vacancy. Monthly depreciation. Let's go into our depreciation sheet real quick. So this is a pretty complicated one because there's so many things that need to be done on the front side. There is a capital expenditure estimated of $66,710. This is not a number to hold me to. This is just kind of my quick assessment of back of the napkin, trying to figure out if this property is worth dealing with or not. As a result, based on, the way the calculation's set, there is not a lot of monthly depreciation numbers calculated out into this, and keep that in mind. And I can explain that a little bit more in further detail if you go to lucrativelandlord.com and see our blog posting on how to calculate those out. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of expense that needs to go into this property just to get it to a rentable condition. Let's scroll back up to so monthly expenses currently around $1,000, and this does not include the mortgage into the property. And I would expect an additional good $500 to $600 in monthly depreciation numbers if this was calculated out properly with the without having to spend all the CapEx stuff immediately. And we'll go down to the summary. So just off the top, again, this number is a little bit low as far as the expenses because there needs to be another $500 to $600 in depreciation. And so you kind of run into this $400 difference, but we haven't factored in the mortgage on this property. And I can't imagine that the mortgage on $140,000 is going to be less than $400, which kind of makes this property a dud. It's kind of where you're at. It's a ton of work, too highly priced, and not a lot of profit in it. That's about all I have to say on this one. If you have any questions, do hit us up at lucrativelandlord.com. Please subscribe if you're interested in seeing some more of these evaluations. Until next time, thank you.